And we're on. So welcome everybody to Future Day. We are leaping into the future day, the future this day. It's now the 29th of February. It's a date that only happens every 4 years, so it's a very, very special one. So we're talking about a particularly interesting way of getting to the future, and that is by defeating aging and the science of rejuvenation here. So by way of introductions, we have with me Aubrey de Grey. Well, I'm your host, Adam, and we have Aubrey de Grey, Liz Parrish, and Bill Andrews. Bill Andrews is the CEO of Sierra Sciences. Aubrey de Grey is, of course, with the SENS Foundation, and I've interviewed Liz Parrish last year. We might be doing another one pretty soon too. So, it's Future Day today and tomorrow. For some parts of the world, it's actually today, but for the American continent, I believe that it is tomorrow. And this is an annual event celebrated around the 1st of March with events worldwide celebrating Future Today, in which we seek to broaden our horizons and mobilise for making change. However, most institutionalised days of observance celebrate some aspect of the past. One might well ask, well, how can you celebrate something that hasn't happened yet in the future? But what we're really celebrating here is possibility and prospects for bright futures. And we're certainly going to be talking about some of those with Aubrey, Liz, and Bill today. So we celebrate the our empowerment to mould the future. This is what really defines Future Day from many other days of ritual and celebration. Though we may take comfort in the certainty that history provides us and contentments in traditions, we can't hide for the fact that the future is coming, and it's coming very fast these days. Since we are all moving forward in time, Future Day is really the only way that we can shape make change. The future is really the only way in which we can make change. So I really appreciate all of you for being here today. And I guess I'll just start by asking this question. So we're really all looking forward to a time when we can maintain health of a 25-year-old or such. But this idea of fountain of youth, defeating death, and quests for immortality even have been around seemingly forever. But what's different about today? What's different about this day and age? Aubrey, if you want to jump in.
Well, of course, the main difference is the same difference that always progressively occurs with the development of any pioneering technology. Namely, as time goes on, more and more of the pieces of the puzzle are put in place. More and more of the technologies that are generally perceived to be likely to contribute to the eventual goal actually come to fruition. And the more that happens, the closer we are perceived to be to the goal, though of course very often we're wrong in our estimates of how close we are. Therefore, the closer we are, the more people's enthusiasm increases and the more people are involved in the mission, which of course has a positive feedback effect. So I would say that we are at what some people would call the knee of that curve right now, where the sea change of attitudes, the tipping point of attitudes with regard to the feasibility of seriously combating aging within the foreseeable future, that's beginning to be something that many people, and I would say quite soon most people, are actually on side with.
Liz, who's the CEO of BioViva USA, would you like to chime in?
Sure. Yeah, I think that the big difference is what Aubrey is saying, and just more directly towards our company. I think that we are working with technologies that have worked in animal models. Some of them have worked in human model already, and so it's time to start to see what we can achieve in human bodies. We certainly have enough people who are sick and dying every day, sick for a multitude of years, in some cases before that death, that we should start trying these therapeutics. And so I think that for us, being a gene therapy company, gene therapy is starting to pan out very big. It's been showing promising results for several years in both animal and human models, and so it's time to embark on the future today.
Excellent. Well, Bill, yes, Bill from Sierra Sciences.
Well, let me first say I'm really honored to be on this call with Aubrey and Liz. And Aubrey has just done a tremendous job at making this field a very reputable, legitimate field to be in. Before the time of Aubrey, we were totally under the radar because people we worked with were afraid of what everybody would think of us when we're trying to do all this stuff. And Aubrey has really made the field of a lot better. And I want to say I'm impressed with Liz and what she has shown, what lengths she will go to help promote this field too. So let me say I'm honored to be here. But in terms of my answer would be a little shorter. I think it's just the science is for real now. Okay, it's before there was some data suggesting that we could affect the aging process in just animals, but now there's really good science saying that there's real good data for humans too, and I think that's changed everything. So my answer is the science is far better than it's ever been before.
Absolutely, and yeah, thank you all for introducing this very interesting subject of regenerative medicine and the science of defeating aging. So yeah, it's interesting what you said there, Bill. I hadn't really thought about it like that, like a time period before Aubrey, like it could be like VA, right? Yeah, unfortunately, recently we did lose a great mind in the field of AI, Marvin Minsky, who died at the age of 88 on January the 24th, 2016. So I thought it befitting that, like, I should have a quote with him, of him, and so now he was often quite blunt in the way that he described his views and this is on the topic of whether science and religion or tradition are compatible. And he said, well, if you look at the short-term effects of religion, they're great. They make stable societies, except when they go crazy, which is frequent, and they do social services, but in the long term they guarantee death. I think death will go away, and we don't need to pray for it, we have to work for it. And this is what, this is what you guys seem to be doing, in my view. So on to the next question. It's been brought up, especially in the past, that the medical community seem to shy away from conversations about aging. Well, if you would agree with this, why do you think this is the case? And it certainly seems like Aubrey's been a bit misrepresented in the media. Is it that people don't want to sound like they're promising too much, or don't want to say anything that could be misrepresented?
I think there's been a lot of that. I mean, I'm very honoured that Bill regards me as having made such a big change, and I certainly feel that I have played a part in the progress of this conversation, in mainstreaming the whole idea of doing something about aging. But I definitely, as everybody does, I stand on the shoulders of giants in that regard. I think that Cynthia Kenyon, for example, certainly has a great deal of the credit in this regard for 10 years before me, coming along from a position of much greater vulnerability, because she was in mainstream academia, saying more or less the same thing. And a decade before her, you had Michael Rose more or less saying the same thing. So there's a long history of this kind of thing. But I do feel certainly that I mean, really, Bill put it in more of a nutshell than I did, that the progress of the science is what is driving all of this. The more we put in place, the more progress we make, the more optimistic people in the scientific fields of relevance become, not only in how they feel, but in what they're willing to say on camera and on stage, the more people get the message that the whole thing is not just something that the occasional eccentric person with an incomprehensible accent is inclined to say.
Okay, so I suppose there's a pause, and I will go. First of all, I'm very embarrassed that Bill said how lucky he was to be on this call, because I think that I'm 10 times luckier, and these people are actually my friends, which is a million times luckier than I had been just a couple years ago. So thank you, guys. I think that what is going to drive this, and I've a bit forgot the question, but is we need to look at multiple mortalities. And so we're looking at drugs now for multiple mortalities, and that's something that we weren't doing before. We were looking at one treatment for one disease, right, or one symptom of aging. And now with this new metformin trial coming out, we'll actually be looking at multiple end uses, right? So that's really exciting, and we really do have to change that. So we have to work with a system that's designed to do that. We have to work with a system that's designed to not just look at the end point in one what is considered disease state, but in actual multiple ones. And I think that's what's really going to bring this science along a lot faster.
And my comments on this are that every event that's ever occurred since the beginning of time has had controversy. And I just learned to kind of stay out of the controversy as much as I can. Unfortunately, because we all need funding to do our research, in some sense we have to get involved. But I'd like to say I defer to Aubrey mostly to handle that part of things, but so that I can focus more on the science and stuff like that. I do not understand the medical community. I do not understand why some are opposed to it. I've heard stories that they are worried about us competing with their products, putting them out of business and stuff like that. But I think a lot of the funding comes from non-companies, non-large pharma companies and stuff like that. So nothing really makes sense. And I've just resigned myself to the fact that I'm not even going to try to understand it. I'm just going to try to continue to get funding the best I can. And I'm just going to be grateful to people like Aubrey and others who are going to deal with the more controversial issues.
Yes, well, I don't really understand the sociological aspects of the medical community either, but I do get the impression that people nowadays feel like they have more permission to discuss previously taboo topics with regard to diseases related to old age. It's just some kind of paradigm shift that we've gone through, or we're going through now. There seems to have been a lack of impetus and lack of a general disregard. Arguably, this has slowed down aging research on regenerative medicine. So Thomas Kuhn, who's a famous scientist or philosopher of science, said that science has made progress in paradigm shifts. And whether you buy into this or not, is there a need for further paradigm shifts? Has there been paradigm shifts within the medical community and elsewhere regarding aging? Without these paradigm shifts, do you think, is there a chance that progress might be slower? And how do we go about making these paradigm shifts? Are we in the midst of a paradigm shift now?
I would say we're in the midst of two paradigm shifts. There's a paradigm shift in terms of the scientific approach, the biomedical research approach, and there's a paradigm shift in terms of public attitudes. The shift in terms of biomedical research revolves around the acknowledgement that repairing the damage of aging may be easier than slowing down the creation of that damage that the body does throughout life. Until we had the concept of sense, everybody essentially in gerontology, if they thought about intervention at all, they were thinking in terms of emulating calorie restriction, things like that, that would essentially clean up our metabolism and make it create damage more slowly than it normally does. And damage repair is something that has taken quite a while to come to the forefront. But now, if you look not only at what we put out, but at literature from the bulk of mainstream gerontologists, you'll see that this is very much an established orthodox concept now. So that's a paradigm shift very much. But it's a paradigm shift that has mostly happened now. There aren't very many people out there who are really resisting it anymore. The paradigm shift in terms of public attitudes, unfortunately, is at a rather earlier stage of happening. The attitude that aging is somehow not a disease and is somehow completely different from the things that we think of as diseases in old age, like Alzheimer's, that attitude remains extremely prevalent. And something really has to be done about it fast in order to, if we're going to actually increase funding for this critical work. The good news is that some of the most important credentialed mainstream gerontologists are now beginning to sing to the same kind of hymn sheet that I have been singing for more than a decade, emphasizing the importance of this misconception, the importance of understanding that there is no difference other than semantic between the diseases of old age on the one hand and aging itself on the other hand.
Absolutely. Bill or Liz, if you want to chime in.
Okay, so something happened there. I'm getting my echo again and stuff. Liz,
Bill, perhaps you just mute for the time being.
There seems to be some sort of audio. If I'm okay, I guess I could speak on this. I've got quite a loop. Can you all hear me in a way that makes sense?
I can.
I can, but I'm definitely hearing an echo. Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe Bill, you unmute and mute for the time being. Maybe it'll resolve itself in the next minute.
Okay, so let's see if we. You can. I have still a pretty bad loop, but I'll answer this. How I can answer from my side of it. People on a different level. Again, I'm not the scientist. I'm not the medical doctor. But I do medical doctor. And people are thinking in the public. And what I see is a burst in sort of a new synergy of understanding aging in a different way and aging in accepting this new paradigm of possibility. And I think that it's actually very difficult for people for two reasons. And one of them is they're both based in guilt, I believe. And one of them is that all they've been able to do is affect aesthetics. So we have been very good at a nip and a tuck and things like that. So when you talk about something like age reversal, or aging more slowly, people tend to go to that realm of. I'm echoing. Sorry. Should I stop? I see. You know what I see your meter going when I talk. Maybe I'm coming through both of yours and mine.
Well, I have headphones on, so I don't think you're coming through me.
I see. Okay, maybe it's gone now. No, I still see. I'm registering. Aubrey, could you try muting? Okay, am I still echoing? I'm still echoing. Oh, not now. Okay, yeah. So Aubrey, somehow we're hooked up to each other, and I'm coming through yours. So that's awesome. Okay, so I'll just go back to what I was going to say. I think that a big stopgap in the perception of this sort of research in the community, the wider community, not within our community, but on the rest of the face of the earth that I run into, is that a lot of people have sort of a guilt psychology. They think that it is shallow, potentially to reverse aging. There are the groups that they always point to, the Hollywood groups of people taking a nip and a tuck and things that generally don't lengthen your life, but they maybe increase the quality of your life for a short period of time. But as we look at aging as being something that goes all the way through you, that we potentially can affect the aging cells throughout your body, through your organs, not just your skin, people are really waking up to the fact that, in fact, people have been taking a nip and a tuck because they want to look like they're in a more youthful state. We know that that's more attractive. I really didn't understand this when I got started, but it's been right in front of us. There is an attraction to youth, and beauty is sort of based around that sort of youthful look. So people have made a lot of effort to try to look youthful, and then this science sort of gets tied up, rolled up, and snowballs down the hill, looking like it's part of that whole adaptation to look younger and better for mates. And in fact, it sort of is. Of course, if being more youthful is fantastic, but we of course want you to be more youthful all the way through. So I think that people have to break down the construct of this being a sort of selfish sort of science and realize the health benefits of that, and I think that they would be more interested. So I'm not sure if I made that clear because I've said it a couple times. The other thing, I was just in a conference 2 days ago, and somebody took a poll, and they had everyone raise their hand as to how long they would like to live. There were some people who raised their hand at 80, some people who raised their hand at 120, others who raised their hand at 150. And then there were the rest of us who raised our hand that basically said indefinitely. And it was interesting because he said he had never seen that many hands raised for that before. But when we started asking questions back, like, why would you want to plan your death? At what time is it good for you to die? If you were living a youthful and quality life, at what time would you say, okay, well, that's fine, then tomorrow or next year, that'll be a good time for me? Most people decided in the room that they would rather live indefinitely instead of having a limit. And I think that this went back to that guilt feeling of, I'm not qualified, I'm not good enough, I shouldn't try to look younger because that's something that is embroiled in a whole different industry that and made fun of. It's basically a lack of understanding the science and understanding human psychology. We know that appeals to us. We know that very few people have a limit on their life. They have a limit on how youthful and good they want to look. But we have to break it down so it doesn't seem like this sort of, a nip and a tuck and a quick fix for a really relatively short life. So anyway, that's my thoughts on it, and they're a bit scattered because I wasn't exactly prepared for the question.
Fantastic, Liz. I really enjoyed listening to that. Bill, would you like to chime in if you want to unmute there?
The major, can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. The major paradigm shift that I've seen is maybe 10, 15 years ago when I would tell people that I was trying to, solve the aging problem. I would use the word cure the aging problem, and I still do, but people would look at me like, God, I just described something from some alternate universe that they couldn't possibly comprehend. It was so new to them. Nowadays, I never run into that problem anymore. People seem to take it for real. And again, it's because of the real science. And plus, also, I just thought of something while Liz was talking, and that's that there's books now. Aubrey and I have both written books and stuff like that don't just talk about aging and what it is and stuff like that. It talks about what we're actually doing to solve the problem. I mean, there might have been some books beforehand. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but if there were, they were all based on studies from mice and stuff like that, not just humans. But I think that maybe that's a big shift that's occurred, is that there's people are now starting to believe that there's real stuff out there, whereas before it was just quacks and charlatans talking.
Right. Okay. So yeah, that's a problem. I mean, like if the I don't know, for want of a better word, movement in regenerative medicine is diluted with people who are like ostensibly considered quacks, then that might be a bad thing. It might have a deleterious effect. There doesn't seem to be much. I don't want to politicize this too much, but observing American politics, there doesn't seem to be too much discussion about science. Especially like regenerative medicine compared to some of the hot topics like the arguments about stem cells and cloning and abortion. This time around, there doesn't seem to be that much politicization of the science there. Do you think there will be much division amongst ideological lines this time round in the American elections and in general in politics moving forward?
Who's going first?
Nobody really wants to touch politics. I mean, he did say that he wanted to collaborate a lot of different genomes together, and the UK is doing that too. They're working on the 100,000 genome project. I think that we're working into these type of things, but I think that vastly this is a discussion about small businesses. I think that this is an innovation discussion. It is more than just do we want to live longer and healthier. I think that the US itself would substantially benefit financially from having, healthier patients or persons. Definitely by, compacting mortality at least to the last year of life, like we see sometimes in the supercentenarians. But, I'm not sure that this is a debate right now that needs to be brought out in this election. I think that it needs to go through Congress. I think aging as a disease has started its march. I think that it would be something wonderful to have passed, because we would have more money going into educating students about it and more people on the job working directly towards it. But vastly, I think that right now, what we need to do is create a regulatory system that we can live in, a regulatory system that has a faster track for some of these new therapeutics that are coming to market at a fraction of the cost. In 2015, the median estimate price for going through the U.S. FDA was $2.6 billion. And right now, without being able to go for the multiple mortality mode of one treatment maybe affecting a myriad of diseases, you're looking at taking one treatment for one disease. So that's a big deal, and that's a big setback. And these are all somewhat entwined political issues, but we need to know where to start and start the conversation and go from there.
Excellent, Liz. Aubrey or Bill, would you like to chime in on the politics?
Yeah, I kind of will probably build on something that Aubrey has said in the past, and that when it comes to politics, I kind of think of the future, like 100 years after we cure aging. Aubrey would talk about, I've heard him talk before about, should we condemn the people in the future by making a decision now? I'd like to look at the idea of in the future, there might be something politicians might put on the ballot that says, should we ban the cure for aging because of all the problems that it's caused? And I always believe there's no way anybody's ever going to even allow that to be on the ballot, because curing aging is going to be a good thing. We're all going to benefit from it, and there will be some problems that occur, and we'll solve them. But right now, I don't know how to really involve that in politics unless the politics is going to help us find funding.
Sure.
Yeah. So, of course, I'm not a U.S. citizen, though I am a U.S. permanent resident. So I won't be voting this year. But the thing I think we should look at here really is, what are the dynamics of the different communities involved? We know that politicians, ultimately, their number one goal is to get re-elected, and therefore the trends in public policy tend to lag. They tend to follow public opinion rather than leading public opinion. So that's the first thing that has to be taken into account. But the second thing that is particularly unusual about this particular area is that it's an area of technological research that not only has the potential to have a huge impact on society, on humanity, when it comes to fruition, but also it's one that is being watched very carefully by the public before it comes to fruition. If you compare it with powered flight, for example, powered flight has had a huge amount of impact on society since it was invented, but before it was invented, there were about half a dozen people in the world who had the faintest idea how close it was to being invented. Nobody was paying attention to the development of powered flight until it came into existence. And that's going to change things a lot. That's why I always emphasize when I talk to people about this whole business, when I talk to policymakers, or for that matter, when I talk to people who are in the business of thinking about the long-term future of aging, like, for example, life insurance companies or pension companies or whatever. When I talk to those people, I always say, listen, it may be a few decades before we really see these technologies come along, but that's not what you want to be thinking about. What you want to be thinking about is how soon these technologies are going to become widely anticipated. How soon we're going to get sufficient proof of concept in the laboratory to convince the public, and therefore policymakers, that this is coming, that it's only a matter of time. If that happens in the next 5 years, then that is when everything's going to change in terms of the conversation, in terms of public opinion, in terms of public policy, in terms of public expenditure.
Excellent. And you did touch on one of the questions that has appeared on the Hangout page. And as someone asks, but more specifically, realistically speaking, people want to know how long, in your combined opinions, will it be before a viable, semi-affordable longevity treatment is available either to rejuvenate or prolong life significantly? Is it greater than 20 years? I'm quoting from a question that was supplied on the Hangout page.
It's all funding. I mean, it could happen right away if we all had the proper amount of funding that we need. So it's all funding. You know, Aubrey's probably got the biggest, most widespread program with a lot of different things he's doing at once. If he had his funding, I believe he could have all this done in a year. But it's just impossible to get all the funding that's needed. So it's really more of a question. It's not a scientific question. It's a funding question. I think all of us can say we could have something in a year or two or something like that if we had the proper amount of funding.
Well, so let me respond to that a little bit, because I certainly never talk in terms of that kind of time frame. I believe that certainly the things that we work on are mainly at an early enough stage that we're talking about a minimum of 15 or 20 years before they can really hit the clinic. Now, of course, what we work on is a lot more elaborate than what, for example, Sierra Sciences work on. I do believe that we could develop much better ways to stimulate telomerase in a year or two, but I am not sure how comprehensive the benefits of that are going to be. That's, of course, why Sense Research Foundation works on such a wide range of different areas of research. However, what Bill is absolutely correct about is that it is all funding in terms of the time frames. I believe that as of today, we're probably being slowed down at the foundation by a factor of 3 in terms of the rate at which we are making scientific progress, and purely because of funding. In other words, if we had, let's say, 10 times as much funding, and even that would only be $50 million a year, then we would be able to go 3 times faster on the science. Now, that's going to change over time. I don't think that we're talking about a difference between 20 years and 60 years for getting this therapy going, because, of course, as I said in my previous answer, the more progress that gets made, the more enthusiasm there's going to be, the less there's going to be skepticism about eventual success, and therefore the easier it's going to be to bring money in. So we will reduce that factor of 3 over time. But the critical question is how soon we start reducing it, because right now is when the time is being lost, when the lives are being lost.
I think that you had 2 questions there, and I think that I would address them very differently again. I think that I would go back to Bill and say that certainly we potentially have therapeutics that could show a change within the next year. With funding and the availability of moving forward, we can actually get a lot done right now. We have things that work in animal models. We have some things that work in humans. I can tell you, I can show you my arms from our myostatin inhibitor. I'm definitely gaining muscle mass. We have things that work now that can help people, and that's why BioViva was built. It was built to actually help expedite things to the public. But I've got to go back because you actually asked 2 questions, and I think that they're not closely entwined. You asked how soon until we have a viable, inexpensive product for the public. Well, you know, I can give you a treatment. It may reverse your aging, but we don't know how long you'll live. And a human is very different than a mouse. It's going to take years and years to vet this. So then on that side, I would go back to say we could probably start treating people now, but back with Aubrey's numbers of 60 years, we won't know for 60 years whether that person lives longer from taking those therapeutics. So it's kind of I'm pulled between the 2 answers. You know, we have seen that definitely people will are coming up for the risk to take a myriad of drugs and surgeries to look younger, to go for quality instead of quantity. We want to give you both. That's going to take us time to figure out how much quantity we're giving you, but we feel like we're close to be able to give you better quality in some senses, but a lot needs to be vetted out. So, the public is a very interesting thing, and the circles that follow these are very interesting things. They're very touchy people. 1 minute they're in your circle, and the next minute they're out of your circle. They all want their therapeutics. They want them now. They live in a microwave generation where we put food in the microwave for 1.5 minutes and we have dinner. People want everything they want right now, but on the other hand, they want a predictable product. So that takes a lot longer, right? We have to see that we can get human results, number one, with some of the most promising therapeutics. But number two, even the people jumping up and down and knocking on my head for results and answers, they want a predictable product. So we're caught in between two areas. We can certainly start to throw rocks and sticks at things, and we should for people who are dying. Of course, our tools are better than rocks and sticks, but you know what I mean. But there's a lot to answer for in what you asked, and there's two things. There's one, there's getting some amount of results, and two, there's getting a predictable product, and then there's the third, really, that is bringing the cost down of that product.
I want to just perhaps say a word or two more, because I think that some of the audience may have the impression that the three of us are somewhat disagreeing with regard to this particular topic, and I want to emphasize that we're really not. We've just kind of addressed different facets of it. The critical thing that I want to emphasize is the uncertainty that's involved with regard to how the science is going to pan out. There are certain aspects of aging that are going to be pretty easy to address, and certain aspects that at the moment look pretty hard to address. We don't know the extent to which they interact, and ultimately that degree of interaction, the degree to which fixing one thing will have a side benefit on other aspects of aging, that is the determinant of when we will reach this point that I've called longevity escape velocity, of how soon we end up basically being able to kick the can down the road and stay one step ahead of the problem. I believe that there's a huge amount of uncertainty about that. So I'm kind of emphasizing the pessimistic end of that spectrum. I think that, even though, of course, most people would call me an extreme optimist, that we have a significant chance of having some aspects of aging which just need to be fixed in order, because other things are not fixing them kind of vicariously, but which turn out to be really hard to fix. But we may get lucky. And certainly, I very much applaud the work of people like Bill and Liz, who are addressing the lower hanging fruit in this area, because that's the only way that we're really going to find out how much we have to address the higher hanging fruit.
And let me add, first of all, I don't know which is the lowest hanging fruit. I think we're all possibly working on the lowest. We won't know until we have something. But there is a big issue of, like, when are we talking about aging? When are we talking about just making people healthier? And when are we just talking about making people live longer? Because if we make safer cars, we make people live longer. I mean, is that curing aging? Right now I'm not going to answer that question, but we can also, let's say we came up with a cure for multiple sclerosis. Well, the people with multiple sclerosis are going to live longer. Did we cure aging? Again, I'm not going to answer that right now. And then there's the other fact, just curing aging. Did we turn somebody like Betty White, who looks like she's in her late 70s, even though she's in her 90s, if she becomes 24 years old again in appearance and health, I mean, are we curing aging? And again, I'm not going to answer that question because they're all important. Okay, so we're all working on all these kind of things, and trying to come up with semantics to describe what it exactly is not that important. But I like to think of all these things as multiple sticks of dynamite, okay, that we all have burning inside of us at all times. So we have all these things, these fuses burning, that are going to kill us one way or another. And I'm working on one stick of dynamite. Liz is working on about 3, and Aubrey's working on about 20 of them. It's like there's all these things that are going to happen. We have to figure out a solution to all of them. But we're just taking different focuses at the moment. That's nothing that says anything else different than that.
Fantastic. And yes, I recently did an interview with Bill Andrews on curing aging, and so that's up on the YouTube channel. So for anybody who just tuned in, we're with 3 titans of regenerative medicine, if you don't mind me saying such. We have Aubrey de Grey from the SENS Foundation, we have Bill Andrews from Sierra Sciences, and Liz Parrish from BioViva. Now, let's move on to the more science-oriented stage in the panel, with maybe some focus on particularly interesting projects. So the first question is, what projects are you currently involved in, and how do you hope they will contribute to the overall project of defeating aging? Aubrey, would you like to start, or Bill? Bill?
Well, since I'm the one unmuted right now, let me go first. Since Aubrey's got 20 fuses he's working on, his answer might be a lot longer than mine. But you know, the short answer is that for the last like 20 years, I've been looking for a small molecule drug that will get inside of our cells, stimulate the production of telomerase to lengthen our telomeres. The prediction is that we will get younger and healthier, but again, we won't know until we try. So the big goal of mine is to just answer the question: will lengthening telomeres provide the benefits that a lot, but not all, scientific literature says it will? What else did I want to say? Okay, so right now, the major project that we're working on, though, is getting funding. So since 2008, when the global financial crisis of 2008 hit, it's been a lot more difficult to find funding. I used to not have any problem finding funding. I had wealthy investors providing everything, but then they couldn't after 2008. So I've resorted to, my project now is to find ways of generating our own funding. And so I've created or teamed up with marketing companies that would market things that we've already discovered, just to try to bring us funding for our research. We would get a royalty out of that. And the first thing was natural products, because those were the easiest and fastest to be able to get on the market. But we've also done, and that, you know, we license those to other companies, and the same with skin creams, skincare products. We license those to other companies. We don't do any of the marketing ourselves, except when our contracts require it. But we do use the royalties to fund our research. Now, most recently, I'm now working very closely with Liz Parrish and BioViva on gene therapy. So we've, you know, Liz can probably tell you more about it, but we've joined forces along with a company called Clef in New Zealand to come up with a gene therapy approach. Now, to you know, do, among many other things, deliver telomerase to cells. But I look at this as being the non-affordable way. It's going to be quite expensive to be able to have such a treatment. But again, I'm looking at this as a way for Sierra Sciences to get funding to support our research to find that small molecule drug, which I think will be an affordable solution that everybody can benefit from. So those are my projects. My projects right now are getting funding to fund the main project, which is finding a small molecule drug.
Fantastic, Bill. Liz, would you like to chime in here, especially in response to Bill Andrews' question there? Oh, Bill Andrews' point about working with you at BioViva.
Sure. So we have a collaborative effort to go into a South Pacific island and potentially open up a clinic that would be BioViva, Sierra Sciences, and Cleft Life Foundation. And we're really excited about that. As far as products and what we're doing as a company, remember, I'm first and foremost a technology hunter. So I am hunting for the technologies that will actually get this to work. We're not a research organization. We're a two-clinic model trying to help people now. We will continue to look for companies with promising therapeutics to bring to market over time. Of course, our own project is probably my project in general, the BioViva project, which is the 2 gene therapies in one body. And we are continuing to track the information that's coming out of this study, the testing that's being done. We are going to continue to track that for a year and 18 months, and then every year after for many years, and we will eventually have that data. Once it looks like it's telling a full story, we'll release that data so that people can see it. So, of course, what we're doing is looking at combination of therapies, therapies themselves to bring to market to help people now. So we're a little bit different, and we can't really talk so much on the research side of it because the research on what we're working on has already been done to the extent that we think that we should be helping to save people's lives now.
Excellent. Aubrey?
Yes, so, well, our projects are actually quite well known. I think Bill is right to say that we have our fingers in a lot of pies. For any listeners who are worried that the 7 strands have suddenly become 20 strands, I should reassure you that no, we still have 7 strands. It's just that, of course, within each strand there are multiple examples, and we work on those multiple examples sometimes. But yeah, so the range of projects that we work on is pretty much the same as it's ever been. Which is, of course, good news. It means that the paradigm of sense is very much standing the test of time. However, the one big change that has happened is also good news, which is that a number of our projects have now been taken out into the private sector. Of course, we've been acutely aware since forever that for every wealthy individual who is willing to give serious money to a philanthropic non-profit effort, there are 100 who are not, but who are willing to engage in even high-risk visionary investment. And that's exactly what we want to capitalize upon as much as we possibly can. Really, the big news of our work over the past year and a half, is that that's begun to happen. Our work on atherosclerosis has moved out into a company created by one of our major donors from Arizona. Our work in macular degeneration has moved out into a company founded and run by one of our proteges, actually, someone who used to work for us for a number of years. Our chief operating officer is now working on some work that's extremely important, especially as a stopgap, as a bridge towards sense, namely organ cryopreservation, with a view to servicing organ transplantation markets, not only in terms of transplantation as we know it today, but also potentially in terms of banking artificial organs created by tissue engineering. And there are a couple more things in gestation in that regard. So this is all very good news. However, while saying that, I always need to emphasize that there are some projects we have which are not at a commercializable stage, even at the level of spin-out, let alone product. And therefore that the foundation itself, as a 501c3 non-profit, is in no danger of declaring victory and closing down. We are absolutely in need of continuing the projects, the key projects on, for example, mitochondrial mutations, or glycation-induced cross-linking of the extracellular matrix, or telomere elongation that is independent of telomerase in cancer. These things are major projects that require significant increases in funding and are very much my major focus right now.
Excellent. I guess relatedly, there's been an interesting question in the forums there, and that is regarding the pace at which the science is advancing. How impactful do either of you believe that widening the bottleneck of human clinical trials would be?
I think that it will be massively beneficial. As a matter of fact, I have been spending my time, I just got back from Eurasia and then Europe after. I have been traveling the world trying to talk to the top officials of countries to see if we can find a regulatory zone that will actually let us use these therapeutics in human models. We're losing over 100,000 people a day. Aubrey's been talking about this for a long time, and we actually need to get into the the human model. Now, we're asking to get into terminally ill patients initially, which is a very broken system. We're looking at people who are terminally ill. They've been turned away from every other therapeutic. So any win that we found in that would be fantastic, but these people have the opportunity to be pioneers. We are also looking, believe it or not, right here in the USA to be able to use therapeutics for compassionate care. And there's a group that has recently joined forces that would like to bring BioViva in and to allow us to sit at the forefront of taking the risk of treating patients with compassionate care, patients who have, again, no other option. So we would like to work with these models, take the wins that we can, and of course then move these therapeutics back to earlier and earlier disease states, and then maybe back as even as immunizations. And of course, I always hope that all of these companies will be successful, all of Aubrey's companies will be successful, and all these small biotechs, because we would like to be a springboard for those therapeutics. So, and these are the most promising therapeutics. I mean, let us really mind our P's and Q's. You know, pharma hasn't offered us much. You know, 97% of what they have given us have only treated symptoms. They're not treating biological aging. This is the game changer. And so these sort of therapeutics that do address this biological aging will be the promise of the future. And we're excited to move those forward. And so I personally think that one human is worth 1,000 mice, if not more mouse. How many are there? And and I think that this has got to be the way of the future. The human body is very different than the mouse, and let's find out what happens. We certainly have a lot of people in need. We can't move forward fast enough.
Well said, Liz. Aubrey or Bill, would you like to chime in on widening the bottleneck of human trials?
Sure. I think to complement what Liz said about other jurisdictions, which is without doubt extremely important, I think it's also worth mentioning that there are very encouraging signs right now in the US. The biggest one, clearly, is the metformin trial that is in the progress of seeking funding to occur. So metformin may or may not, from a scientific point of view, be a promising anti-aging drug, but certainly there are questions that need to be asked about that. But the key thing that's happened is that a group of gerontologists have succeeded in convincing the FDA, the regulatory body in the US that determines the eligibility of clinical trials. They've been able to convince them to actually allow the trial to go forward with an endpoint that is defined as delaying aging. They've defined aging very carefully as essentially the combination of a number of different morbidities, a number of different age-related conditions. But the point is that the endpoint is defined in terms of the simultaneous delay of all of these conditions. And that is something which has been a pretty good approximation to how most gerontologists think about aging for a very long time. The word comorbidity occurs in the literature of gerontology and has done for a long, long time. But until now, that concept, that way of thinking, has not percolated through to the regulatory bureaucracy. And now it has. So even if this particular first trial is as unsuccessful as I expect it to be, nevertheless, the concept of a trial that's actually focused on aging as a definable condition has now been established. And that is huge in terms of the enthusiasm that the private sector, the big pharma in particular, will have with regard to taking things forward that might actually, by genuinely conventional definitions, be anti-aging.
Thank you, Aubrey. Another fantastic answer. Bill?
Yeah, well, when I think of clinical trials, I think of two types. One is the kind the FDA approves, and then all the others. I think they're different. So we can do clinical trials, but the big problem is funding again. We always come back to funding. And then, so that's something I think will happen a lot more when we get funding. But the clinical trials that are FDA approved has been kind of like have a weird history. I'll say right after 2008, when I first decided that in order to get funding, I got to start getting on the stage and speak. I got to get out of the lab and start doing that kind of stuff. I ended up being surprised that after I'd get off stage, people from the FDA would come up to me and say, we'll never allow you to do a clinical study on something that's designed to cure aging, because aging is not a disease. I was pretty floored by that, but I thought, okay, so that means I won't be able to do FDA-approved studies. But now that's all changed, hopefully, with, as Aubrey was saying, the metformin study that's underway. And so I'm actually pretty excited about that, because that changes everything. Because I've been telling potential investors and everybody for years that, you know, sure, we can come up with a cure for aging, but we'll never be able to test it in an FDA-approved clinical study. Now that changes. So I think that's all for the better. But I guess that's all I have to say on that.
Fantastic. All great answers. A short while, or maybe a couple of years back, I got to interview Weiss scientist Donald Ingeber. I'm sure you've heard of him. Now, he's been doing a lot of interesting stuff at Weiss, but one particularly interesting development there is they've been doing an organs on chips project, which is basically, instead of just having agar plates with cell colonies, having sort of the environmental moving conditions of tissue to test drugs on chips, basically, without actually having to involve humans. So that might actually speed things up as well in terms of like trials. Now, moving on, what other general advances, in particular in science, and what projects do you think we should all be keeping an eye on, or that are very important moving forward?
I think we should be definitely keeping an eye on the anti-cancer research that's being underway right now, especially in the immunological area. I want to mention like Doctors Patrick Hu at the MD Anderson and Dr. Dipnarine Maharaj in South Florida. They've got some remarkable things underway that I think are going to really show ability to fight cancer. They're both in clinical studies right now, so it'll be a while before we actually see these actually in practice. But I think that's where every day I'm looking to see for more news on that in those areas.
Well, Aubrey, oh, sorry, Liz.
Oh, I thought Aubrey was coming up. So areas that I'm excited on, are, of course, are gene therapy areas, but not only that, monoclonal antibodies, T-CAR cell therapies, immunotherapy for cancer. I'm really excited about our doctor, Dr. Jason Williams' work in ablation and immunotherapy, and he's going to have a big announcement with a backer with that, hopefully in the next 6 months. That's finalizing now. Telomerase therapy, myostatin inhibitors. Of course, these are what we're doing right now. If I didn't think they were interesting, I wouldn't be partaking. This is myostatin inhibitors are coming out of all over the place. So even Eli Lilly has come out with a recent study of their antibody, injectable antibody that is increasing muscle mass. So we're looking forward to seeing very soon an older population that's stronger, and this is really applicable. So this isn't just looking at research, but you know, senescent cell killers are going to be really big. This is some recent studies came out that are very promising. On the large end, it was 35% increased lifespan for mice. I just met with a team 2 days ago that has a monoclonal antibody that's doing something similar. So you know, you take out the two words gene therapy, and it seems to set people at ease a little bit. So these are all fantastic. Again, I would look at all of the work that Aubrey's doing, anything focused on biological aging, reversing some sort of type of biological aging or symptom thereof, macular degeneration. These eye studies are going to be huge. I think this is where we're going to see CRISPR take its first big land on the strip, and we're excited about that, of course, because we'll want to use those technologies as soon as they're vetted. So that is my feelings on it. Probably there's 10 other things, and they'll pop in my head in 30 seconds.
So, yeah, of course, I agree with what both Bill and Liz have said in this regard. I would add, I guess, that well, as everybody knows, and as has already been obvious from the answers I've been giving, we tend to take the worst case scenario approach to the combating of aging. In other words, yeah, we're delighted when things are easier than they might have been, but we want to prepare for the possibility that things are harder than they might have seemed. So in relation to cancer, of course, our approach to combating it involves controlling telomere elongation in cancer, which is a very difficult and very elaborate thing to do, and it's definitely going to take a while to make it really work. And no one would be happier than us if the whole thing ended up being completely irrelevant, because we were able to really completely control cancer using the kinds of immunotherapy that Bill and Liz have just mentioned, which I certainly agree has been taking leaps and bounds over the past couple of years after having spent decades in the relative doldrums. So that's a kind of example. I think that we definitely need not to count our chickens with regard to these approaches, but it's looking very, very good. I think also it's worth talking, Liz mentioned CRISPR briefly. I think both CRISPR and the other real blockbuster success story of biotechnology over the past decade, namely iPS cells, induced pluripotent stem cells, both of those areas still have a long way to go. In the case of CRISPR, the main thing that continues to be improved by leaps and bounds, again, but still has some way to go, is the fidelity, the bearing down further and further on the off-target incidence of modifications. The more you can bear down on that, the more titer you can put in, the more engineered DNA you can try to apply without toxic side effects. And that, of course, determines the number of cells that you can actually modify in a living organism, like an adult human being. Similarly, with induced pluripotent stem cells, the trick is, number one, to de-differentiate cells into a state where they really have lost all of their epigenetic memory, so that they do not retain the characteristics of the cells they came from. And number two, to figure out better and better ways to redifferentiate those cells into the form that you want them to actually have when you transplant them into the body. I think at this point the leaders in that area are probably Biotime, the company formed by Mike West, or essentially reformed because it already did exist, which is pioneering a technology that he developed at his previous company, and it's really systematically determining how to create progenitor cells of all levels of partial differentiation that can be useful and also safe with regard to stem cell therapy. That's going to be, in my view, the future of stem cell therapy.
Fantastic. Does anybody want to respond to Aubrey's comments there about
I just want to say he's absolutely right about stem cells, and that again, that was one of the 10 things that I overlooked. There's a great treatment, potential cure for even diabetes type 1 in the pipeline with the iPS stem cells and liver as a dual organ, plus any sort of organ regeneration, building organs, growing organs, things like that with stem cells is going to be very much at the forefront of probably what we'll see more done with in the next several years. Very exciting.
Fantastic. Now, relatedly, talking about what sort of particular interesting projects we should get behind, what public fund? Now this is another question from the forum. David Wood asked this, and what public funding initiatives should we ask governments to prioritise to have the biggest impact? And Dave puts forward the asking US politicians to get behind the TAME project, as recommended by the Global Health Span Policy Initiative. And they're interested in having a whole body preventions and cures, which sort of sounds on the face of it similar to what you guys are trying to achieve.
Well, let me say, I think that we shouldn't put all our what is it, apples in one basket, or whatever that trite expression is. But the TAME project is good, but I think it's not going to be all we need. So to spread it out more thinly would be a good idea.
Yeah, so I didn't want to limit that question to a response about the TAME project. So also, is there any other initiatives you think we should ask governments to get behind funding?
Well, clearly they should be funding treating biological aging. I think that what we need to do is we need to broaden that girth, and we need to ensure that the focus on the diseases that are being studied is geared towards looking at biologically old cells. Certainly we've poured, or the government has poured, and we've paid taxes to pour a lot of money into treating the symptoms of aging, and we've lost a lot of money there. It's sort of gone to the grave, you could say, with the people who were being treated with that. So we need to definitely get money flowing into new research. We need to ensure that the government isn't just giving grants for research organizations to repeat the same studies year after year. That is a big waste of money, and I know that that in fact is happening. We need to make sure that somebody is accountable for these research projects moving forward step by step. We don't need to be doing the same project 10 years in a row. So I think that there needs to be some streamlining there. There needs to be some places where the government redesigns what they're doing with their finances, and there needs to be places where they actually take a step back. You know, the FDA does not need to be controlling what medical doctors do. That's medical doctors' business. The FDA needs to make sure that safe drugs are coming through the FDA through their gold standard. You know, just in the last 50 years, they've pulled over 50 drugs that, after going through their standard, were in fact not safe. So on the government side, we really need to have a little bit of an overhaul, and that's very unlikely, and that's why people often look for new regulatory systems. But what maybe is more likely to happen in the U.S. is maybe a new streamlined process in another avenue that actually takes into account these new therapeutics. But yes, definitely reallocating funds for the right type of research, even under their headings, sure, under cancer, under heart disease, under Alzheimer's, you know, but make sure that the research is being done on the biological cell. You know, make sure that we're actually addressing most likely where the problem is coming from and the genetics underlying it.
Excellent. Aubrey, did you want to say anything on this topic?
I don't think I have all that much to add to what Bill and Led have said, actually. I think really the emphasis has to be on which types of eventual treatment are being aimed for. You know, I always distinguish between three types of treatment for the chronic diseases and disabilities of old age. Number one is if you like, the geriatric medicine, directly treating these things in the way that one might treat an infection, which of course has only very limited and modest efficacy. And the second is what we would think of as preventative medicine today, things like statins and ACE inhibitors that kind of manipulate our metabolism so that damage accumulates less rapidly, but again, which can only have a modest effect because they manipulate metabolism, and metabolism has been optimized by evolution to do what it needs to do to keep us alive. And then the third version, which of course is what we do, the damage repair approach, which kind of avoids both of those problems. I think that it remains an extremely neglected area of biomedical research, both at the level of basic research, the kind of stuff that Sense Research Foundation does, and at the level of subsequent work to take it through to the clinic. You know, even scale up. You know, I mentioned in my previous answer about the importance of redifferentiation of iPS cells. Of course, the goal there is to be able to do cell transplantation and organ transplantation that will escape immune rejection. We already have a kind of weak version of that in the concept of MHC matching, making sure that things are histologically compatible at the level of part of the immune system, but that only somewhat reduces the need for the risk of rejection and the need for immunological drugs after transplantation. So we've got to do that. And the big barrier to what's called autologous transplantation is that it's personalized. Personalized medicine is expensive. And you've got to produce a new kind of, you can't go through the same kind of manufacturing procedures and standardization procedures that are used for a drug that's the same drug for everybody. So that kind of thing, there's not nearly enough emphasis on making that happen. And the reason there isn't is not because the value is not understood, it's because the value is longer term. At the moment, people can get things approved that have these big drawbacks of, for example, immune rejection, and they do that because that's where the money is, and that needs to change.
Excellent. Fantastic, Aubrey. Yeah, so I guess relatedly on the other side of the coin, with regard to the private sector, if you had the opportunity to speak to somebody who is relatively well funded, but seemed to be on the fence about funding rejuvenation research, what arguments, assuming you'd be interested in talking and convincing these sorts of people, would you give? What arguments would you give to try and convince them or address their concerns to fund the work that you're doing?
So I'll go first because my answer is very boring. Unfortunately, my answer is just that there's no answer. In other words, you've got to take each person as they come. My experience over the past decade or more of doing this kind of advocacy is that everyone has different concerns. Maybe they don't think the science is feasible, maybe they think there are going to be sociological consequences that will be unmanageable, maybe their wife doesn't like it. Everyone's different. And so one has to do something that does not at all come naturally to me, namely do about 5% of the talking and 95% of the listening, and take it from there.
Well, let me go second then. I kind of will follow the lead of the organization called People Unlimited. That's an organization of people that really want to extend their lifespan and health span as long as possible. But what their philosophy kind of is like, don't bother talking to people that aren't already sold on the idea. There's so many people out there that really want this to happen. Let's just focus with those people and bring all those people together. So when I talk to a potential investor and they seem really skeptical or negative or think there's some political or religious reason why it shouldn't be done, I just say, okay, I understand where you're coming from, and I move on. I just don't want to start spending a lot of time talking to those people when there's other people to talk to. Actually, let me just interject, since I did mention People Unlimited. There is a really great conference coming up. I think it's going to be the biggest event of all time in the field of anti-aging. It's called the RAD Festival, R-A-A-D Festival, and it stands for Revolution Against Aging and Death in San Diego. And I think people should go to this. It'll be really big. All of us on this call are speakers at that conference, and it's the website's just www.raadfest.com. But yeah, so back to my answer, I would, instead of trying to talk somebody into it, I would just look for somebody that's already agrees that it's worth doing.
I think that most of the people that come and look at BioViva do so because they are interested. We just say your most important currency is time, so what will you do with yours? And people with a lot of money realize that if they live longer, they certainly are going to probably have more money. Hopefully those who don't have as much will too. I mean, certainly we hope the best for everyone. So, I just basically take it one-on-one that, in fact, they have come to me because they are interested, but we think that results are the most important thing. So our company has been very silent and has just started to do the paperwork and is starting to come out with the paperwork in the next couple weeks that are even to allow anyone to offer us money. We thought that the most important thing was to get the early money in the door and prove that it works. You know, and so that, I think, is what people want to see. I have flown on private jets. I have been on private boats. I have been all over, and people want to see that this is a reality. And I think that when we have one breakthrough, all of these companies and many, many more are going to get a flood of funding. There are a lot of people that are waiting on the fence, and they want to jump. They really want to jump, but they want to see that this will work in their lifetime.
That's a really interesting insight there. So, yeah, it's so with these people that you get to meet who are on the fence about it, what are they most about on the fence? They want to know it can happen in their lifetime, you mentioned, but is there any specific concerns, scientific concerns, which they have?
You know, most of the persons, again, it goes back to the earlier conversation of psychology, they want to see a more youthful body. They want to see a more youthful appearance. They're thinking generally on the lines of outward appearance, and then, of course, we're trying to sell the all the way through the body sort of aspect. We're trying to sell health, something that seems a long ways away. It really hasn't been sold well to people. Aesthetics or you know, calisthenics, you know, there are two different sides. People want to see that they will physically look younger, and then of course the quantity of life would be secondary to that in many of the cases. There are a few people that approach us that understand the full aspect of health, and those people are growing all the time, and they're very interested in getting involved at this level, because it's a new industry, and it's almost, as far as BioViva, it's a real trailblazer in the next step in healthcare for humans.
Let me add, I really don't think there's that many people on the fence anymore. I mean, the quacks and charlatans have created this kind of image that we're all doing something that's a bunch of pack of lies, but I don't think people are actually there anymore, because I rarely run into anybody that believes that. The problem that I run into isn't that they're on the fence. It's because of this global financial crisis of 2008 has made it even impossible for the billionaires in some cases to be able to come up with money to fund the research, even though they are very, very interested in doing it. I've had billionaires tell me that they're going to help me find funding, you know, from somebody else, just because they don't have funding available. So it's the fence has gotten a lot less crowded, let's say.
That's true.
Yeah, fantastic. Good response, Bill and Liz there. And it's interesting. I mean, the sort of message. If somebody who is advanced in age had some visible signs of rejuvenation, that might signal to the rest of the world that there is something really to this, and it can't be too far that, you know, regenerative medicine is viable for everybody, and that may actually increase funding.
Well, we first have to come up with something to treat that really old person with that has everything to gain. Right now, if somebody said, okay, I've been given like a year to live, and I've got $1 billion in the bank, what can you do for me? All of us will say, except for Liz now, that we really don't have anything yet. You know, we just need funding to develop the treatment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So
I would certainly, I have a couple therapies that I would like to throw at it, and I think that we should be, in fact, able to have an effect if they work the same way that they work in animals and in every human cell culture along the way. And of course, I tested those, and we'll see how they do. I've certainly had some changes and some structural changes, but really that could all be placebo, so we're chasing the data, and we'll collect that data, and we'll see what we have in 12 to 18 months.
fantastic. So, I mean, each of you are involved in very interesting projects, but I guess what I would like and what viewers would like to know is what keeps you excited, what keeps you going for such a long time, especially Bill Andrews and Aubrey de Grey have been at this for decades. What is keeping you motivated? What's the impetus there?
Well, let me go first.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead. Well, it's an obsession. It's an obsession. I think we all share the same obsession. It's just that, and I've had this obsession since I was like 10 years old, and it just can't end. Now, you know, everybody has jobs. It's nice to have a job that we really like doing, and and so that's a lot of people say, why are we spending all this time trying to cure aging? Isn't it frustrating, et cetera, et cetera? Well, if I wasn't doing this, I'd have to be doing something else, and I can't imagine anything else I'd rather be doing. This is the greatest job of all time, and I am continually amazed at the progress that keeps coming, not necessarily from my lab, but from other labs that would get published in scientifically peer-reviewed journals. There's tremendous progress being made, and that just motivates me over and over and over.
Yeah, my answer is fairly similar. Really, what matters to me, what drives me, is the fact that I'm making a difference. Every time I move forward, I mean, every scientist, of course, doesn't know whether they're going to make a difference. They only are putting themselves in a position to have some chance of making a difference. But, you know, the successes that I've had, the progress I've made, the contributions that I've made over the past 10 or 15 years lead me, every additional year where I make more progress and make more of a contribution makes me that much more confident that I'm going to continue to make a contribution and to accelerate the defeat of aging and thereby save a lot of lives. And I've always, even since I was a kid, I've been driven by the desire to make a difference. So fundamentally, that's what drives me and what keeps me motivated.
Fantastic.
I think that outside of meeting these really awesome people, I mean, if I just implore everyone who's watching this to look at the eyes of the people involved with this. I mean, we're meeting great people. These are great, honest to God persons. And then what really drives me is, you know, I mean, I wouldn't want to share them with you, but I am emailed on a regular basis with people who are either dying or they have sick children who are dying. And, you know, there will never be a stop for me until these people are spoken for, until they have access to therapeutics that may in fact help them. I won't be done. I'm often contacted by parents, and it's interesting, they know their child's disease very well. Often these diseases are monogenic diseases, meaning they're just, and it's an effect of one gene. They're aware of what it is. There sometimes has been very little to no study in the area, and it's possible that delivering that gene would help this child. I was recently contacted by a family just a couple days ago with a child with ALD, adrenoleukodystrophy. This is a disease that our doctor had been successful at least one time in treating, not reversing the damage that had been done, but stopping the disease in its track by treating with the gene. It is very, very difficult to be a person in a situation with a company that doesn't have the regulatory right to use a therapeutic for a person or a child, and knowing that they're suffering and they may not make it. So I do get a lot of these emails, and they are more fuel for the fire. So, you know, on one hand, I meet a lot of great people, and they are like a sort of a buoy of souls out there trying to do the right thing. And on the other hand, I'm pressured enormously by people in the world who are suffering now and really need access to these therapeutics. And we would, of course, like access to use them so that we know if, in fact, they will work or not.
Absolutely. Yeah, aging is a major cause of suffering. And perhaps some people think because it's natural, it's been happening for so long, it's permissible. But it's hard to argue about reducing suffering in abstract. And so it seems to be about, you know, making the medicine to reduce suffering. I think that's a very good point you bring up there, and that's one of the points I did want to address in this interview in abstract, is about the cause of defeating aging. If not anything else, if it's not to extend life, at least it's about reducing suffering. Does anybody ever want to comment further about the, you know, the goal of reducing suffering?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that's you know, our company talks about disease mitigation. We don't talk about infinite lifespans. If you're healthy, what do you die of? We don't know, of course, so that puts us into a situation where people have interest. By the World Health Organization's definition of health, if you're healthy, you should not be dying of anything, absolutely. So we would like them to hold them to that definition. So our whole point is to try to reduce suffering. It is try to take something like Alzheimer's disease, a disease that affects 5.3 million Americans as of last year, that lasts 8 to 10 years, is incredibly debilitating, and induces massive amount of psychological suffering and physical suffering, heart disease, cancer, kidney failure. If you can't agree on how long a human should live, and this is hardly a conversation that we should even have, because no one can quite agree on that, whether, you know, for whatever reason, but we certainly should agree that we should mitigate these diseases as soon as possible, that curing disease is number one, and that somebody else's job is to solve all the other problems. This is a big enough problem in itself. We just happen to be a very, very well-versed group of persons on all of the issues of, you know, economics and population and everything else, because we get asked these questions. But reducing suffering should be a mandate to do as soon as it is possible.
See,
I mean, just to echo. Yeah, just to echo what Liz said. I mean, that's certainly what I mean when I say I want to make a difference. I want to make a difference to the amount of suffering in the world. I want to make it less. And people often get this wrong. People often think that what people like Liz or Bill or myself do is to try to extend life for the sake of extending life. And sure, we think that living longer is a good thing, but absolutely the point is that living longer is a side effect of being healthier. And ill health is the #1 source of suffering, no question. It's definitely the thing that impacts people's quality of life more than anything else. Most people, when they die of old age, in one way or another, they die after a long period of suffering, a long period of decline and disease and decrepitude and dependence and general misery. And any measure that you have of the impact of quality of life that aging has puts it massively ahead of any single thing, any other thing that the world has to contend with these days.
You know, and I just want to add, whoever created the statement, age gracefully, I mean, it should be hung and shot and everything. It's not like that. We keep seeing images, and people's perceptions are based on these images of retirement homes where everybody's having fun, dancing, playing shuffleboard, playing party games all the time. It's not like that. I spent a lot of time personally in assisted living homes and hospices and stuff like that, where these are people that can no longer stay in the retirement homes because they've lost the ability to take care of themselves. And this is not a small population of people. This is incredible. Almost, it seems like every other block there's some home that's actually turned into an assisted living home where people are living there in separate rooms and have nurses that are just going around taking care of them. And this problem's only going to get worse with the baby boomers all getting older than 65 right now. This is going to get worse. They're suffering a lot. When I go into these assisted living homes and hospices, they're suffering. They are not happy. They are depressed. They can't breathe sometimes. They can't swallow sometimes. They're having terrible times. When the depression is probably the worst of all. And these are the kind of problems that me, Aubrey, and Liz are trying to fix. Okay, we got to get rid of this kind of stuff. And okay, this is not as important, but it's still important. the economics of taking care of all these people is a real problem. And so the work that we're all doing is going to help save financially the government. And we talk about suffering all over the world, but even in the United States, there's a tremendous amount of suffering, and it's costing the government and all of us a lot of money. And we got to fix that problem too. But suffering is by far a bigger problem than everybody realizes.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, that really, yeah, strikes home to me. When I was younger, I used to work in a hostel for elderly people, and you know, I'm not trying to diminish any dignity they had in their later years of life, but I could tell they were suffering. It was obvious, and they didn't have the quality of life that they once did, and they had so many wonderful stories to tell me about what they were doing in their life while they were able. And some of them were quite, you know, very eloquent in telling me how sad they were that they could no longer do these things. Yeah, so all you're doing wonderful work. All you're doing wonderful work.
Adam, I've got to tell you, unfortunately, I'm going to have to go in a few minutes.
Yes, thanks, Aubrey. All right, well, I really appreciate your time with us today. It's been wonderful having you here, and you're doing fantastic work. And on reducing the suffering related to old age. So yes, we did schedule not quite close to 2 hours for this conversation, so I understand you've got other things to do. But before you go, might I just ask, how can people take action to further the cause of defeating aging?
Right. So, of course, the call to action is absolutely the thing that any event like this needs to end with. And, of course, different people have different ways in which they can act. If you're a biologist, then, you know, work in the right areas. Find areas that you think you can make a difference in. You know, consult with us to identify the things where the most difference can be made. If you're a journalist or whatever, then, you know, make use of that to get the word out, to educate people, not just to sell papers and sensationalize things, which actually does us enormous harm, you know, talking too much about immortality and living forever and not enough about the science. You know, be a proper journalist about this and actually get the word out in a manner that contributes to the work being done and being understood. And of course, the biggest thing of all right now is simply the resources. And this doesn't only apply by any means to wealthy individuals, this applies to absolutely everybody. Everybody can actually make a difference. If you do the numbers and you ask, you know, how many lives does $1 save, or does $100 save by being given to anti-aging research relative to being given to anything else, then it comes out way ahead in terms of the number of lives you save. So from a purely pragmatic, utilitarian, effective altruist point of view, it's also the thing to do. That's all I really have to say.
Many thanks, Aubrey.
And let me go and just quickly say, it's really just getting the world to quit having this perception that we have all the funding that we need. Why this? Everybody I talk to, they think, how come this hasn't been done yet? They keep talking about doing this. The problem isn't the science. We know exactly what to do. The problem is we don't have the funding to do it, and people just don't realize that. So spreading the word, getting the word out, whatever. That this is the major issue: funding.
Yeah, funding is always an issue, and obviously, you know, sharing the information. We definitely need to hit wider circles. I think that we get very insular. We definitely have a fan base to this science, and I love those people, and I hope that they will share their information outside of their groups, because actually this is science and business that affects everyone, and the more and more we expand this loop of interest, we're going to have more influx of ingenuity and investment, but we need to get this out to the whole world. I know, Aubrey, you definitely fly around tirelessly talking to people, and I actually end up places that are totally not associated with what we do, and somebody says, oh, I know somebody in that field. That's this guy, Aubrey de Grey, you know, he's got this long beard. So I'm so happy to tell you, and I'm sure you know, that you have definitely touched the outside of the loop, and Bill does regularly too, but we need to do it in a very impactful way, and I think that that does have a lot to do with journalists that Aubrey was talking about, you know, actually hitting the general public for us a little bit harder than we've been hitting them, and letting them know that we're here and that we're ready to start. And Aubrey's been here and been doing for a long time, and so has Bill. So yeah, absolutely. More interest in more variety of ways and reaching out to a more diverse group, I think, is going to help us massively.
Excellent. So in a nutshell, have any of you got any sort of closing remarks? That's take-home statements for people if they weren't captured by the last question.
Well, Aubrey, I thought maybe you want to go first because you were going to lead first.
Sure. I mean, really, I'd prefer to leave it with what I just said. I think the emphasis really has to be on getting this to happen faster, and that all revolves around money, and that all revolves around public enthusiasm and public education.
And I'd like to add and repeat what I said earlier. I think all of us, the three of us doing our research, and everybody is going to benefit from what I think will be the outcome of the RAD Festival. So the more people that go and attend this RAD Festival, I kind of think of this as a Woodstock of music. Okay, this is going to be the biggest event of all time in anti-aging, and I think it's going to be a great way to get the word out. So tell all your friends and stuff like that. Go to www.raadfest.com and join us.
Oh yeah, that's going to be a very cool event. That's going to be an event with speakers and music and just a feel-good atmosphere, and I think that's going to be fantastic. When, Bill, is that in September?
It's August 4th through 7th, I think. Oh, and I hate that I can't remember, but I think it's August 4th through 7th.
Fantastic.
Fantastic, and yes, I agree, and I'll definitely put the links to that in the description of the video. So yes, once again, it's been wonderful having three great minds with us today, these titans, as I said before, in regenerative medicine. So thank you, Aubrey, Bill, and Liz, for doing such great work. I cannot stress that. Yeah, I can't. Yeah, so I'd just like to emphasize that I'm really appreciative of you being on the show today. I'm really looking forward to seeing regenerative medicine science develop, and in particular your projects. And so, yeah, I'd just like to thank also the audience for being here, and I'd like to ask the audience a question. Do you believe that the future could be better? And particularly, do you believe that in a world where health is more of a matter of choice rather than being somewhat determined by one's age? And in the scientific engineering pursuit of reducing suffering related to older age. So don't let the future just happen to you. Get off the wagon and push. Be active and engaged. The fulcrum of power to shape our future is right now. So on March the 1st, always remember to celebrate Future Day and celebrate increasing the health span and be active in the growing community around the globe in making for a better future. Many thanks to you all. Cheers.
Thank you.
Signing off.
Thank you. People, go out there and do it. Be the change. You can do it. Anyone can step in and start to help us become more vocal, better, increase the science. Seriously, get motivated and pioneer the future with us.
Thank you. And thank you all. And dear viewers, do me a solid and subscribe to this YouTube channel. And yeah, hope to speak to you all soon.